We had so many great guests on the show.
They were wonderful years, weren't they, leading up to the Steve Vizard show and the reviews and all the other...
Yeah, Mary said, oh, well, look, go and see if it works and have some fun. So I did it, and of course the show not only ran for 9 episodes, fast forward, but it and its successor, Full Frontal, and we kept changing the name as we brought new people in. We ended up running for more or less 10 years, so it was a pretty good run for a sketch comedy show.
Steve, were you always like a funny bloke? Were you always doing fun things at school or as a kid?
I think I came from one of those families where my mum, particularly my mum, was funny. My dad had been a patrol officer, so he had a sense of humour, but he was a solid sort of a bloke. But my mum had a sense of humour. She'd always been sort of amateur show busy. She'd gone in those South Street competitions in Ballarat.
Yeah, Ballarat.
And she could tap dance and do all of that. You know, so that was her style. And our house was one where people were always laughing. We grew up in a house where there was always filled with laughter. And I guess at school, because I was a late developer, and so I was always a smaller kid. I mean, later on I shot up and outward, as it turned out, sadly. But I guess my way of dealing with things was always to crack a joke, as you want to do when you're a smaller kid. So I was always sort of, I guess, that sort of the smaller kid who was the funny kid. And then I went to uni. I got into Melbourne Uni and started doing law and arts. And I had this thing. I'd never been in plays or stuff like that. Well, that's not strictly true. When I was at school, I got cast in King Richard III. Our year did it. And because I was the only kid, I think it was about year 11, whose voice hadn't broken, get this for being ignominious, I was cast as Lady Anne. I was in next to final year, and I had to come on in final year, virtually, in a dress and what do they call those things? A wimple.
Yes, you'd have loved that.
And a wimple, and all of the parents, the whole school was there, and it was about the most embarrassing experience of my life. And it was and so that was my first big showbiz gig. And then I went to uni, and they had this thing called the Law Review and the Argy Review. And what it was just basically a chance for a whole lot of people who were doing all these courses, serious courses, medicine or whatever, to get together and try their hand at comedy. So I got together with a mate of mine, Roger Wallace, and we wrote all these sketches. And we got up on the stage, never done it before, and people laughed. You know, you must have found that the first time you ever try that, it is a mesmerisingly fantastic experience.
You don't really believe it, do you?
Well, no, not with the material we had. And it was. I'll tell you my very first experience. It comes back to me. I grew up in Hawthorn, and you know Christchurch, which is right at the end of Bridge Road there.
Yes.
It's up on a hill, the old bluestone church there. And we grew up in the Hawthorns, which is an old bluestone house there. And my brother and I went to the local. We went up to the Christchurch there, and the Sunday school, and they put on a Christmas panto. And Mum and Dad said, "You have to be the wise men." And because it wasn't that well attended, there was only 2 of us. Andy and I had to play the 3 wise men, which was a bit of a stretch. But we were about 7 and 9 or 6 and 8, something like that. And Superman and Batman were big at the time. So the audience was sitting there. It wasn't a big crowd, but I came out and we stupidly talked Mum and Dad into letting us wear our Superman and Batman costumes as the wise men. So there was some sort of trumpet thing happened for the arrival of the 3 wise men, and instead of 3 wise men, out ambled these 2 miniature superheroes for some godforsaken carrying presents.
Isn't that wonderful?
The audience went up, and Andy, my brother, started crying. That put him off showbiz forever. So that actually was my very first showbiz experience.
Isn't that marvellous? That's wonderful. Who made you laugh as a young kid, Steve Vizard? Who was the comic or somebody in your childhood that made you laugh?
I remember, look, there were so many. I mean, I used to I mean, I'd sneak up and I'd watch Graham. So you guys were heavily involved in a lot of those sort of shows. I would, there was a great American comedian I used to like, Bob Newhart.
Oh, lovely.
And he'd do those faux phone calls. You'd only hear one end of the phone call, and
Yes.
he would do those. I was a massive fan of his. Later on, I became a Woody Allen fan. He's an acquired taste. A lot of people don't like him. I'm a big Woody Allen fan. I think he's a fantastic filmmaker as well. But, I had a pretty eclectic taste, and I also loved all those English comedians. I laugh at Morecambe and Wise, and then later on, and that influenced us in our generation as well, Monty Python.
Yes.
I remember going to see Barry Humphries the first time I saw Barry Humphries, and I thought it was, just this phenomenal thing. This one man could stand on a stage and play all of these different characters and hold the attention of an audience for hours. And
wonderful.
I was mesmerised by Humphries. But I guess my taste in humour is really eclectic. I'll laugh at pretty much anything, and there are so many great comedians out there. I mean, I like physical comedy. Bob Hope, I love.
Yes.
I thought in his era and in his time, what a remarkable talent. And in fact, it was one of my great experiences to interview Bob Hope and to meet him. I used to love those old movies. I'd laugh at Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney movies.
Yeah.
And again, it was a great experience to meet Mickey Rooney. I mean, there are so many great comedians and performers, and to be honest, when someone can entertain a large crowd at that level, for a sustained period and for year after year, they're talented. Whether it's your particular brand of humour or not, it's very admirable what they do.
Steve Vizard, Tonight Live was so hugely successful. Why did you eventually pull a plug on the show?
Well, look, it had rated really, really well, and it was a fantastic opportunity. I mean, year after year we had great guests. It was, I look back on the guests. We had people like, just great names coming through. I mean, I mentioned Bob Hope, but Mel Gibson, Chevy Chase, and Audrey Hepburn was Phil Collins and Kirk Douglas and Sir Peter Ustinov, Martin Sheen, and that to me was one of the great thrills, to meet these people, as you must, and to talk to them and just have a chat with them.
Yeah.
But the show happened, and it happened live, unlike a lot of shows that are done these days. For the most part, even though we pre-recorded in the later years a couple of shows, for the most part we were doing it live, and that meant I wouldn't get home till 1 a.m, and by the time you pack up and everything, and it just happened to coincide with the time that I was starting up this production company with Andrew Knight. We were producing a lot of shows, and at the same time as I was starting a family. So when I started on air, we had no kids, and by the time we finished, I had 3. Yeah. So if we kept on air for 10 years, God knows what would have happened. So I sort of thought, it's actually just taking too much of a toll at a time when I should be spending time with my kids.
Sure.
So I said, I sort of did in probably about 5 or 6 years enough TV for me, anyhow, for a lifetime, and probably for the viewers for a lifetime. So, I got out of telly, being on air for me, everything that I wanted to get out and more, and I loved it.
One of Bruce and my favourite nights was, I think, your 40th birthday party in the backyard in Toorak.
That was, that was the night we had. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was the night we had a lot of guests there, but one of them was Darren Hinch.
Yes.
And I think that was the night where we had those slot machines, those sort of like game machines you could play on.
Right, yes.
And one of them was a skiing machine that you could sort of stand on and pretend you're skiing down a slope, and there's sort of a picture on a screen in front of a slope. And anyhow, after the party was over, we packed up, went to bed, and it was about 4 in the morning, and I heard this this crashing sound. I thought, geez, we're being burgled. So I went downstairs, and there, still standing on a machine, and he'd had a few, and I don't think he knew where he was at this point, was Darren, collapsed on the machine, skiing endlessly down this slope somewhere. He must have been doing it for hours. So I got him off the machine, and this was at our house in Toorak, and I pointed him out into the street and said, off you go, Darren, and the cabs are up that way. And as he went off into the sunrise, he turned at me and he said, great night, Steve. He said, how long have you been living in Sydney for? and at that point, I thought, if he ever gets home, I'll be a monkey's uncle.
Oh, that's marvellous.
Was that the night that for the food we had a hot dog van out in the street?
Yes, out in that laneway.
Yes.
We'd go out and get a hamburger or a hot dog or a soft drink and then come back into the backyard.
That's right. We hired like one of those massive sort of outdoor vending buses that you get that they have like at the Royal Melbourne Show or something, and they served everybody at the party. But unbeknownst to me, because we were in the street, everybody in Toorak turned up.
Yeah.
And when we were settling up the bill, a week or so later, the bloke hit us with the bill. And I said, geez, that's a lot of serves. He said, oh, yeah, we served about 3,200. I said, what was it? He said, oh, yeah, no, they kept coming till about, 10 past 1. We must have served everybody within a 10-kilometre radius.
You did.
And hot dogs.
You did. Jerry Connolly was there. Do you remember?
Yeah.
That's right. And did he not do? In fact, was there an election that night?
Yes, there was. There was. And I think Bob Hawke got in, or
somebody got in, and Jerry Connolly was there as a guest, and he ended up doing this fantastic impression of whoever it was. It might have been, I reckon it was
Paul Keating, perhaps, was it?
Paul Keating. That's who he
Yeah.
was. It was fantastic.
it was marvellous. Now, listen, just another chapter in the Steve Vizard book. Tell me about Mr. Potts, a Collingwood 6-footer, a full head of white hair, a gammy arm, neatly dressed in a tweed jacket. What's Mr. Potts' influence on your life?
He's my personal trainer. He's you're talking about Frank Potts, who was, when I was 14 years old, Frank Potts was our fill-in maths teacher at my school, and he'd actually retired about a decade before. But for some reason, every single year he came back and taught maths. And I could remember nothing of what he taught about maths, but everything of what he said about the First World War, because as it transpired, Frank Potts was a First World War Anzac, and he would tell us about everything. He'd tell us about the trenches and in the trenches, boys, and he became a sort of an inspiration for a play that I've written with Paul Grabowski, who was Count Paul Grabowski from Tonight Live. Paul, great musician, great composer, now professor of music at Monash Uni. Paul and I have written a new piece, a play, a comedy, and with song for the Melbourne Theatre Company, and it's called Last Man Standing. And it's basically the Melbourne Theatre Company, our sort of commemoration of this Gallipoli year. But it's a comedy uniquely. We thought we'd do something comedic. So what it is, just in a nutshell, the plot is it's the Gallipoli centenary year as it is. And I imagined that the pinnacle event would be a Royal Command, Royal Variety Gallipoli concert, which there is, and the concert's going from bad to worse. They put a colonel in charge of it and stuff like that, and he knows nothing about entertainment. So it's going really bad until they discover that there's one last Anzac alive, and his name's Clary Flint. And so they engage this Clary Flint to be the centrepiece of their concert. Unbeknownst to them, Clary Flint is a ratbag. He's a troublemaker. He owes money left, right, and centre, and he's lived a full life. And the more they build the concert around him, the more things start to go wrong. So it's a comedy, but the point of the comedy is to challenge our view about these Anzacs and who they really were. And my recollection of Frank Potts and other Anzacs that I knew is that they were real blokes. They were heroes in their own way, but they were ordinary Australians who did extraordinary things. And so we're making a sort of and we wanted to do a comedy for a particular reason, because one of the great attributes of the Anzacs was their larrikin, laconic sense of humour.
Of course. And helping you along the way, Peter Carroll and William McGuinness, Alison White, Toby Truslove and
it's
Nicky
a stellar
Bent.
cast.
Yeah, great cast.
They're terrific cast, and they're in the middle of it. In fact, it opens. The previews start on coming Friday, next Friday, and it officially opens on Remembrance Day. So there's a big opening on Remembrance Day, and then it runs through all the way to the end of November. So
and where's it on, Steve?
It's down at South Bank there at the Sumner Theatre, in that beautiful new Melbourne Theatre Company complex just opposite the side of the National Gallery there, and it's. We're really excited. Paul's written some beautiful songs, and I say it's a comedy, but it's actually there's some very funny stuff in it. And these are very funny actors and performers, and some great songs, but there's some poignant acting in it. And Peter Carroll, who you'll know has won numerous Green Room Awards and is a very talented actor. He did that great thing. What was that show about the Jesuit teacher? Christian Brothers. Remember the Christian Brothers show? It was a one-man show he did years ago. He was very celebrated. He is a tremendously able performer. Well, he plays this Clary Flint, and it's worth going. I mean, I wrote it, but if I hadn't written it, I'd literally go to see his performance alone because he is a stellar performer. He really, really is. So I'm hoping it goes well, and you know.
And what's it called?
It's called The Last Man Standing, and you can go onto the MTC site for the tickets there, and I hope people enjoy it. And then Paul and I've got a musical that we've written, which is opening in February at the Victorian Arts Centre. It's called Banquet of Secrets, but that's another project that's coming up soon.
Well, terrific. Let's talk about that when
I haven't bored you to death.
No, it's been wonderful. It's just a trip down memory lane, and it's been wonderful, Steve, chatting to you tonight about the new project and those wonderful days at 7.
It's always great to hear your voices too.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
Steve Vizard, a delightful man, and an opportunity to see the Last Man Standing, a new production on the First World War.
Yeah, starting Remembrance Day.
23 minutes to 11. You might